Thank you all so much for joining us today. My name is Dr. Kate Janzi, and I'm excited to have you with us as we start to introduce our new physical product science line here at Science Interactive. Before we jump into today's webinar, we wanted to ask you and find out a little bit more about how you are currently teaching your laboratory courses. So take a second to answer the poll, and then we will dive right into today's conversation. Okay, we're going to give it one more second. Awesome. Let's take a look at our results. So we have got a mix of folks teaching on campus as well as folks who are teaching both online and on campus. So thank you all so much for joining us. Like I mentioned, my name is Kate Janzi, and I am the Chief Academic Officer here at Science Interactive Group. I have been working here for the last 9 years with our curriculum development team to design all of the experiments that go into our physical kits and our digital curriculum. And I'm so excited today to be joined by Dr. Jordan Adams from Delgado Community College. Dr. Adams was born and raised in the Lehigh Valley of Pennsylvania, and she achieved a Bachelor of Science degree in Environmental Science from Moravian College and a PhD in Earth and Environmental Science from Tulane University. After wrapping up a postdoctoral position at the University of Colorado Boulder, she joined the faculty at Delgado in 2019. Since starting at Delgado, she has championed undergraduate science education and outreach. As a recipient of an internal education enhancement grant, Dr. Adams brought in a $15,000 stream table to the geology facilities. Dr. Adams also co-chairs the STEAM Day outreach event for local New Orleans elementary and middle school students and is a 2023-2024 nominee for excellence in teaching.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. We're so excited to have you here. Before I turn things over to Dr. Adams, though, we wanted to set the stage with some recent data on the state of online laboratory sciences. As many of you may be experiencing in your own programs, student interest in online courses and degree programs continues to increase, and that includes in STEM courses. This past fall, Science Interactive launched its first annual lab report, which sought really to better understand student and faculty perceptions of online science laboratory courses. Our survey reached 1,300 students who had taken and 300 faculty who had taught an online science lab within the past year. To start, we wanted to first understand the importance of online science lab courses to students. Among the 1,300 students we surveyed, 91% stated that it was important to be able to take their science lab course online. And it wasn't necessarily just out of convenience, although many did cite this as a reason why they selected an online option. Really, though, for many of the students who were surveyed, the online lab course allowed them to have the chance to take a lab science course when they may not otherwise have had that opportunity to get to campus due to living in rural locations, having work or family care obligations, military deployment, and other similar reasons. Additionally, a number of traditional students cited that online labs allowed them to overcome scheduling conflicts when two labs maybe overlap with one another or with another required course. Taking one of the labs online really allowed them to stay on track to be able to complete their degree. But as I'm sure you all are aware, there are many challenges with bringing a lab course online. So before we move on, we wanted to ask you, what are the biggest challenges for you as a faculty member with recreating a lab course, a hands-on lab course online? Jordan, I'm really interested to know, what are some of the challenges that you faced?
Oh gosh. Well, teaching at a community college, one of the largest, the largest in the state of Louisiana, how do you approach an audience that has such a diverse background? You have students
Oh, yeah.
who are fresh out of high school, you have students who haven't been in a lab for decades. And so getting that hands-on experience with that kind of very wide audience, balancing that has really been a challenge. But it's been an exciting one because you want to be able to approach people with these different backgrounds and show them how accessible science can be.
Absolutely. Awesome. So we're going to go ahead and close that poll and let's see what our audience said. So absolutely, number one reason, 50% of you said that recreating a hands-on lab experience was the biggest concern. And another 25% of you mentioned quality and rigor, and then student engagement and academic integrity, all really, really important concerns when moving a lab course online. So let's dive a little bit into the data, and you won't be surprised to see that the concerns you all have line up with many of the concerns our faculty had prior to bringing their lab course online. So among the 300 faculty members who participated in our survey, 41% cited that recreating a hands-on lab experience was the biggest challenge they encountered when they first looked to bring their lab course online. Another 26% cited maintaining really the quality and rigor of their course materials as their biggest concern. And then, of course, many faculty members expressed concerns about the cost of the laboratory component, making sure that students weren't priced out of their course. But our faculty members that we surveyed found ways to overcome that. And they did that with the use of hands-on lab kits. So for the instructors who were concerned about recreating the hands-on lab experience online, 71% of instructors found that using a hands-on lab kit was comparable to an in-person lab experience, and 74% of students agreed. Additionally, for the instructors who were concerned about quality and rigor, 89% of instructors found that hands-on lab kits gave students the opportunity to learn the knowledge and skills they needed to continue to pursue their course of study, whether that be a non-major student who is just taking a survey course, a one-time science lab experience, or a major student who might be moving on to additional science laboratories down the road. And then when it came to the cost of the materials, we asked students whether the cost of the hands-on lab kits was aligned with the value of the materials in the kit. And 72% of students agreed that the value was aligned with the cost and that the labs really were aligned with what they expected in a campus course. But that wasn't all students had to say about the lab kits and having the opportunity to take their lab courses online. Our students also highlighted how the lab kits allowed them to engage more deeply with the sciences, giving them the opportunity to participate in an immersive learning experience, to engage more deeply and interact with real laboratory materials, and also to be able to study at their own pace and not be constrained by that 2.5 or 3 hour lab period that they would typically have on campus. And then for students who had a virtual component in their course, many of them highlighted that simulated labs gave them the ability to repeat the experiments over and over in a really low stakes environment, to learn from their mistakes, to try different approaches to the experiment and really get a really encompassing experience. So we're curious to learn from you. How are you currently approaching your online labs? So I know, Jordan, you're going to be talking about that in a second, but can you share a little bit about how you're doing your labs online today?
Yes, so I kind of do a mix of the hands-on and virtual labs. At Delgado, we refer to that as a hybrid, but students have the option to do them all at home or come to campus or do on Zoom. We try to really emphasize flexibility because, again, at a community college, our student population is so diverse. We need to meet those diverse needs.
Absolutely. And wow, we have a real mix here today. So we have some
Oh,
folks who
wow.
aren't teaching online at all. We've got some doing students hybrid approach where students do the labs on campus, a mix of hands-on and virtual only and hands-on. So wow, we've got great diversity in the audience of different approaches to labs. That's really exciting to see. So how can you deliver high quality labs online for students? This is where Science Interactive comes in. Whether you're looking to deliver a hands-on laboratory experience to fully remote students, supplement your on-campus experience with virtual pre-labs, or create a hybrid learning experience for students combining hands-on and simulated lab activities, Science Interactive can work with you to bring your science students an authentic lab experience no matter where they're located. We have been working with educators for over 30 years to bring science lab courses online. And to do this, we take a three-pronged approach. First, we offer over 450 hands-on and virtual experiments that students can perform at home. When we ship out kits, those are going to include all of the lab-grade equipment and materials students are going to need, from dissection specimens for A&P to microbes for microbiology to chemicals for students who are taking chemistry and physical science courses. Our labs are flexible in that we will tailor the kit that you are using to your syllabus. You can select hands-on labs, simulated labs, or a mix of both, whatever is going to best achieve the learning outcomes that you want your students to achieve. And of course, we can help you get those kits to your students, whether that be with direct delivery to their home or to the bookstore. Now, with those kits, students are going to need some instructions, and so that's where our curriculum comes in. We have peer-reviewed curriculum across 13 different disciplines. They're developed by our in-house PhD scientist team, and they're peer-reviewed both internally and with an external board of advisors of faculty who are currently teaching labs online to ensure they meet our high quality standards. And then all of these labs or disciplines, excuse me, are certified by Quality Matters. Finally, our content is housed in an integrated lab management platform, which guides the student through each experiment. For our instructors, it can help to streamline grading, and it integrates directly into your learning management system. Like I mentioned, we offer 13 different disciplines, and physical science is our newest discipline that we just launched last month. It is Quality Matters certified, and it is purpose-built for physical science courses. The kits that we have designed include authentic labware, including beakers, graduated cylinders, volumetric flasks for students to learn principles of measurement, to perform reactions. We also have modeling kits included so students can learn the basics of chemical structures. All of our chemicals we provide are microscale. Students have enough to perform each experiment twice, but they're in small volumes to ensure that they're safe to use at home. For the physics side of things, we include items such as spring scales, mass weights, ramps, and friction blocks so students can learn the basics of Newtonian physics. And of course, with all of our kits, safety is at the forefront. We include all PPE that students are going to need, including goggles, gloves, and lab apron. Now, you've heard a little bit from me. I'm so excited to pass things over to Jordan to talk a little bit more about her physical science class.
Well, thank you so much for the introduction. I am excited to be here with you today and tell you a little bit about how we are rolling out these types of labs at Delgado Community College. So, as I mentioned, we're located in New Orleans, Louisiana. So, we have a very diverse student population. And in addition to my background as a geologist, I am one of two faculty members who oversees what is called our physical science curriculum. This semester, I am taking the Science Interactive Physical Science Kits and piloting it as part of our Physical Science 2 lab session. I am offering this in a hybrid modality, which at Delgado means that it has both a virtual component and an online component. My students do have the opportunity to come into campus if they desire, but it is not a requirement. They are able to do it all at home with my supervision virtually over Zoom. And I'd like to point out that this is a course that at Delgado is designed for non-science majors, really emphasizing, again, that diverse student population. This course is required for our teaching grades 1 through 5 associates program. So our goal is to basically prepare these future elementary school teachers for the variety of science topics they'll be bringing to their classroom. And even though I mentioned we're offering this kind of in a hybrid role this semester, we have really evolved this course since I joined the faculty 5 years ago. The modalities that we have offered at Delgado for this specific class has evolved through my time from face to face, entirely in person, 16-week class with exams and hands on labs to purely online, especially during the 2020 era. And we've kind of settled on a hybrid modality because what we have found, at least internally, is that for our non science majors, we've had the greatest academic success when there is some sort of instructor engagement in a face to face or hybrid modality. Whereas the greatest enrollment success, as was mentioned earlier, is when we have that flexibility in course offering, whether it be online or hybrid. So to implement this new lab kit in our physical science course, myself and my colleague, Miss Menge at Delgado, settled on a biweekly hybrid structure where students will have the opportunity to meet with us over Zoom or in person. There's a designated period where they can come and have lab hours where there will be no interruptions, but they are also free to work at their own pace at home as well. Now, of course, there are a lot of common challenges, and these were mentioned earlier, but just to underscore or highlight them again, some challenges that I know that I have had as an instructor is getting my non science majors familiar with the expectations of a science lab, as well as getting them familiar with the terminology, the safety protocols, and things like that, and also just giving them the equipment. That was something that I think not only myself but many of my faculty members nationwide struggled with when we had to move purely online in the 2020 year, was how do we get them this equipment and the instructions to give them quality education. And then finally, something that was super valuable to me as a STEM major, as an undergrad, is encouraging that collaboration and conversation. How do we recreate that in a virtual or hybrid environment? So, if we want to click ahead, that brings us to this question: how do we translate these meaningful lab assignments to the home environment? And that's where I think Science Interactive has been useful. And some of the successes I have found already this semester has been trying to more carefully tie in these assignments to my lecture portion of the class. So when we talk about what it is we're going to be doing in the lecture portion of the class, obviously the labs I've selected tie in very nicely to the curriculum and learning objectives set forth in the syllabus. But I like to re-emphasize that by assigning pre-lab reading that's based not only on my lecture material and notes, but also the very specific goals and outcomes of the Science Interactive Labs. So taking the time to not only tie in what the words are in the Science Interactive portion of the course, but let my expectations and outcomes be clear as well. I also make sure that ahead of each assignment, I release a short video describing each of the pieces of equipment we'll be using within the lab kit. The lab inventory portion of the Science Interactive Kit is very useful, but we all know our students, and sometimes they just like to click through really quick. So having them hear it from me, I found has been very valuable because they know me, they've seen me, they've engaged with me. It's easier for them to relate what they have in their kit to what they'll be doing if I walk them through it. And then finally, bridging that gap, keeping us out of this at home silo that sometimes happens with online courses. These biweekly Zoom meetings, again, are set aside and designated for my students in this class alone, and they can come in, they can interact with me, and they can interact with each other. I've had students set up study sessions to work on the homework for the lecture portion. It's been really a useful way for them to kind of recreate that classroom environment at home. And so I just wanted to walk through what a physical science course looks like at Delgado. Again, I mentioned this is a full year of curriculum. There is myself and Miss Menge, another faculty member at Delgado, teaching the full year of this curriculum that is, again, catering to future teachers of grades 1 through 5. We break it down into two portions. We have the physics and astronomy class, which is Sci 101/103. And then this semester, I am running the Sci 102/104, which is chemistry and geology. So if you look to the right there, these are the topics that I cover in the textbook. And then if we want to go ahead and click maybe once and twice, we can show the labs that I have selected to kind of pair with my curriculum. So, based on the number of assignments that were available to me through the Science Interactive catalog, I was able to go through and select a variety of assignments that not only tie into my textbook and lecture curriculum, but also hit topics that I think future fourth grade teachers may want to apply in their classroom. I tried to pick topics that would be exciting, even if my future teachers are not going to be science teachers. Having an understanding of atoms, of the greenhouse effect, of geologic time. These are things that a curious kid might ask them about one day. And so I wanted them to have not only the concepts, but also the hands on experience behind it. And so I've chosen to highlight the pH of common materials because this was by far, I think, the most popular of the labs I had done this semester with my students, not only because it's fun to get a little messy, but also because I really do think my students realized how they could take this information, tie it into their home life and their future classroom. So on the left there, I have the course objectives for this particular portion of my lecture, which is explaining the differences between acids, bases, and salts, as well as describing the pH scale. And on the right side of the slide, I have a snapshot from my LMS, we use Canvas, of how I structure their hybrid or online lab. Again, I tie in a pre-lab reading that connects my lecture material with the lab assignment, and they are assigned that pre-lab quiz based on the reading ahead of when they will be completing the lab. They can work at their own pace, but that pre-lab quiz is required because it also makes sure they have everything set up to complete the lab before they jump right in. For example, this lab has a 4-hour drying period for these homemade pH test strips. I didn't want them to sit down and think they could get it done in 30 minutes. So that is something that I reemphasize in the quiz so they know ahead of time what they're getting into. I have the Zoom link and then I have the lab material. On the left, I've highlighted some of the pictures from the lab to show why I selected this to highlight today. This is a fun lab where we use a simple red cabbage. We steep it in boiling hot water, and then students are able to test the pH of normal household materials, whether it be Windex or orange juice, hydrogen peroxide. So they have all of these materials, and just by creating their own pH test strips, are able to determine if something is acidic or basic. And this again was something I could see applying in a fifth grade classroom with very little overhead. So that's why I selected this lab and why I felt so excited to share that with you today. Students love actionable items. Oh, sorry, you can go ahead. And so, how I have found success so far, and again, I want to be clear, I am always learning, and I'm excited to hear your comments and questions at the end of this webinar because I'm always looking to improve. One thing I have found is that instructor practice and video are keys to making this lab work. I work through every lab myself because I know my students are going to find a way to try to trick me up or ask me the impossible question the day of the lab. So I always like to work through the lab myself. And then I like to make videos, again, nice, short, sweet, 1 to 5 minutes tops, just emphasizing key points, going over that equipment again, making them feel like even though they're at home, they have that traditional instructor experience. I mentioned I have a set 3-hour period once a week where I can meet with students. At the start of the semester, I surveyed my students and found availability that works for both my schedule and theirs. They are, of course, welcome to contact me outside of this window, but they know that on Wednesdays from 2 to 5 p.m. Central Time, Dr. A will be available for them and they can pop in and quiz their classmates or me about the assignments. And then the final point, I think, is something that all of us as instructors have um, kind of had to learn to deal with, which is flexibility. Some students with more recent science backgrounds, those just out of high school, are probably going to work faster than students who haven't been in a classroom for 20 years. And that's okay. Learning how to balance those different student needs is part of a community college professor's job. And so, especially with the online lab, just allowing them grace and being flexible, I have found has been linked to student success. Ahead of this webinar, I took the opportunity to survey not only my students in the Physical Science 2 lab, but also my colleague Miss Menge's students in a Sci 101 and 103 lab. And thankfully, the feedback we're getting so far is great. A lot of our students, first day of class, they say, I don't like science. And you can see that right there in the top comment. I've never been good at science. I just don't get it. And my goal is to try to break through that ceiling with them and say, you can be good at science. We just need to put the time in. And I think that so far, the success is measurable. I'm able to go in through Science Interactive and not only see their success in grades, but also in time. They measure the time that it takes for a student to complete each portion. And you can see as the semester continues and they get more confident, the time is actually decreasing, which is what we want to see. We want to see that they're confident and comfortable and not hitting these stumbling blocks. Students report that again, flexibility is key and why they chose to enroll in this class. I've had a student now for a few semesters. She's taken my class a couple different, not this same class, but she's taken my classes a couple different times. She hopes to be a science teacher, which is exciting. But she works the night shift. And this class gives her that opportunity to work at her own pace. She knows I'll be there for her and flexible with her, but she doesn't have to worry about running uh, from her job, take a quick snooze at home, back to campus. So I've really was pleased with the anonymous feedback that I've received so far. And lessons learned, this goes beyond just my current hybrid course structure. This goes over the several years now I've been at Delgado. Focus on fun. When you bring a red cabbage home and your husband looks at you seeping it in water, it's kind of fun. It's fun to have the purple dyed hands and chuckle a bit. And I know that my students have shared that they brought their kids into it and got them excited about it as well. If we focus on fun, our non-STEM majors are going to see that science can be accessible, it can be practical, it can be entertaining. We don't need to have this sterile white coat image to our students. We need to make them understand that this isn't something to fear. It can be fun. Setting the pre-lab assignment at least 48 hours before the lab due date. This was something I stumbled a little bit on early on in my career, going back at the beginning, because students will try to just plug in at the last minute. Having them think about what they'll be doing in lab a couple days ahead of time has made their labs go more seamless. And I implemented this not only in my physical science labs, but my geology labs as well. This third point, and this is something I'm looking forward to hearing from our attendees as well as my students, feedback. I've never taught the same lab twice, whether it be my geology labs or my physical science labs. I need to listen to my students as well as my colleagues about what is working, what isn't working. We don't want to keep uh, doing the same thing over and over again if it's not working, right? That's the definition of insanity. And then finally, be available. With an online class, we know it's very easy to get into this rut of just checking Canvas, sending out announcements, and feeling like we're cut off from our student population. If I clock out at 4:30 p.m. every day, my night shift student would have that disconnect from me. So I try to make myself available outside the normal working hours. But it's also okay to set boundaries. I set aside that specific lab period each week to work on my students in the physical science lab, but I also have outside the normal 9 to 5 office hours to make sure that they feel like they can come to me when needed as well. So, yeah, I think now we're ready for questions. I'm excited to have shared
Yeah.
this with you, and I look forward to hearing some feedback about what has worked for my fellow educators.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jordan, for sharing about your class. I love hearing about it every time you talk about this course because I come from a family of teachers. So it's exciting for me to see how you're shaping the next generation of educators. So the first question we have here is from Isabel, and her question is about how you decided on the mix for your course between hands-on and virtual labs. What went into that decision-making process?
So I'm going to be quite honest. For this semester, it was kind of there were kind of a two-pronged approach that I took to it. The first thing I wanted to do was pick out a handful of labs that again tied into my curriculum carefully. And then it's actually really simple. I decided to split the difference. I did half virtual and half hands on. And I tried to be very careful about which I did where. I wanted them to get a good balance of hands on with chemistry and hands on with geology. Um, but also kind of split the difference so that I could see what did my students like better? Did they really enjoy the virtual or was the hands-on more meaningful for them? So because I did that this semester, I know that it's not a very scientific approach, but I figure it was the easiest way for me to test out both options to see what works for my student population.
Awesome. I love that approach. Um, How, with your non-major students, did you approach the safety element? For students who maybe haven't been in school for a long time and are working with the chemicals?
Yes. So that's a very good question. So thankfully at Delgado, we have a lab safety coordinator. So
Mhm,
I simply just talked with her. I had my students look over what is our lab safety contract that they
mhm.
fill out if they were to work in a biology lab or chemistry lab or physics lab on campus or even our geology lab. I almost forgot myself there. I have them look over it and I just kind of did a run through with the safety equipment, just as I would do for ahead of the lab equipment. I emphasized, keeping pets clear of the area, keeping children clear of the area when you're working with certain materials. And then each week in that pre lab quiz, when I emphasize the materials they'll need, I try to make a note in that part of the pre lab quiz that says, again, be in mind you're going to be using boiling hot water. Think about what you need to do to keep yourself safe. Have oven mitts nearby. Work in your
Mhm.
kitchen, things like that. Um, and by tying a grade to it, by making them do it as part of the
Mhm.
quiz, I think that it makes them pay attention a little bit
Mhm.
more.
And I'll chime in a little bit from the science interactive side. One of the things that we include in the curriculum is a lab safety lab that students have to complete. They can't actually access any of the lessons until they've completed the lab safety lab, and that's going to include a lab safety contract. It's going to include a walkthrough of identifying hazards, and similarly, warnings about pets and children and how to store your lab kit safely at home when you may have um, some non-scientists in the mix
Yes.
or future scientists
That's what
maybe.
I call them. I call them my future scientists, my future chemists, my future geologists. Of course, yes, the lab safety part of Science Interactive and the lab kit inventory, those are all prerequisites, as you mentioned. And one thing I love about your interface and having it tie into the learning management system is that you can actually add personal videos to the Science Interactive side so you can emphasize your institution's safety and safety rules and safety contracts as well as the science interactive, so you can kind of marry those two and they're all part of one assignment, which is super convenient as well.
Awesome. So we have a question from Julie. How do you evaluate the student labs? They use Canvas. How do the students submit the work? So I can
So oh
go
go,
ahead.
yeah, you can speak on
I was
that, I
going to say,
think.
so just to speak a little bit on that, we include all of our assessments are included in our platform, and those students can answer as they're working through the lab and submit that, and then you can integrate that into your learning management system. You guys are integrated, right, Jordan?
Yes, we are integrated through Canvas. There are certain parts that are auto graded, but a lot of the more hands-on aspects are actually instructor graded. You go in to Science Interactive, you see their data tables, you see their lab notes, and then you can actually evaluate them. But once you do the grading on the Science Interactive side, it automatically pushes to the LMS, giving that student the most up-to-date grade that they have in the class.
Awesome. Okay, we have a question from Liz. I loved your point about making science fun. Can you share more about the balance in using hands-on learning while making it fun and engaging, while also making sure the proper learning outcomes are achieved?
So this is something that, right, I think all of us are concerned with. We want to be the fun teacher, especially in sciences. We want to be the one that wakes up, the student and says they can do this. But we're also here to educate, and we're also here to have that, to make sure that they move on and are successful and meet all of the expectations before they achieve their degree. So that's one thing I really liked about Science Interactive is when we first did the demos and I started looking through the kits, they mentioned the Quality Matters curriculum. A lot of the standards that they hold their curriculum to are no different than the standard lab manuals that we would use back, when I was an undergraduate. Um, and one of the things that I've kind of struggled with is when we have this hands-on learning, right? That's something that we all want to tie into, this hands-on learning. We don't want to lose that conceptual part of it. And perhaps I'm lucky in that I do teach the lab and lecture combo. So I can make sure that ahead of the lab, they're getting all of the proper learning, that they're well versed in the topic before they get into the fun part. I could see that maybe would be a struggle for someone who only teaches the lab portion or the lecture. So I guess my answer is I hold myself accountable. I make sure and I test their learning outcomes in the lecture portion before they do the lab. I always stagger my lab schedule so I know that we've completed the lecture curriculum before we do the lab. But in an environment with two instructors, that is where I'm a little bit less familiar because thankfully I've never been in the position to have to struggle with that. So it's kind of a non-answer, and I apologize for that. But that's kind of my balance is I make sure to, go through, do like the red, yellow, green light in the lab, or excuse me, the lecture beforehand. What do you get? Put it on a green post-it. What do you not get? Put it on a red, or in the discussion board, same kind of structure to make sure that nothing is falling through the cracks before they actually do the hands-on portion.
Awesome. And our last question is, do you, Science Interactive, provide kits based on instructor requests? And yes, we will work with you. We have standard kits available that meet, learning outcomes that we find in syllabi from across the country. But most folks are using a customized kit that are going to meet their learning outcomes for their individual course. And I know, Jordan, that is the type of kit you're using, correct?
Yes. So I'm using a custom kit because well, at the time we decided to set this up, y'all had not rolled out your physical science. It wasn't officially rolled out yet. So it was great. The Science Interactive team worked with me based on the syllabus and the course schedule to build a lab that hit again those major milestones that I really wanted them to take away. And again, by having that custom kit, you can always make tweaks based on student feedback, what's working, what isn't, which I love.
Awesome. Well, that looks like all the questions we have, and I think we're just about at time. So thank you, Jordan, so much for joining us today, for sharing about your course. It has been an absolute pleasure to get to work with you on this webinar.
Thank
And
you.
then
Thank you.
if you are interested in learning a little bit more about our annual lab report, which the data we showed earlier in the presentation, you can grab this QR code here to download the full report. Thank you all so much for joining us this afternoon to learn more about our physical science product line, and we look forward to working with you in the future.
Thank you everyone for your time. I really do appreciate it. And thank you to all of our team at Science Interactive for inviting me. It's been a pleasure.